بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome back to the rise of the novel, our course about the emergence of the novel in the 18th century. Let me give you a quick idea about what we have had so far. We had a preliminary lecture in which we talked about the course description and the course content and course objectives, and we said that in this course we're going to deal with background information about the 18th century that gave rise to the novel, the new genre that started to grow and flourish from the 18th century onwards. And in the first lecture we dealt with two major revolutions that took place in Europe at the end of the 18th century, which had lots of effects on the emergence of the novel. We said we have four: the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the Industrial Revolution, and the Religious Revolution. Okay? In the first lecture we covered only two, and we stressed the importance of the values and the principles that the French Revolution and also the American Revolution espoused or supported. What did they support? They supported one single most important element, which is the element of freedom, liberty, equality, brotherhood. And in general you can see that the whole world was changing, because all those values are a rebellion or a revolution against the state of affairs that was there in England and in the whole of Europe before the 18th century. And you are going to see soon in this lecture how the life of people looked like before the 18th century. It was a very miserable state of affairs that led people to revolt at the end of the day. If people in England did not revolt, if there was no English Revolution, there was the effect of the French and American revolutions on people in England. You are not supposed to wait for a revolution in order to change. No, you can easily change by learning more, understanding more, communicating, getting in touch. And that was an age. The modern ages in England, in Europe, were characterized by the spread of knowledge. The printing press was invented very early in the 15th century, and once it was invented, books. Before books there were manuscripts, things written by hand. But books started, and the ideas written and explained and expounded in books were easily transmitted to people all over the world, and especially in England, the country we are interested in. So it is very important for us now to start dealing with England before the 18th century, and of course Europe. Before the 18th century, how did the life of people look like? People's lives before the 18th century were largely rural or primitive. What is rural? Rural, that is to say, depending on sheep, depending on cattle. A farmer or a peasant would stay in a plot of land, in a piece of land, taking care of the sheep around him, doing no more than that, just looking, paying attention to his flock, not moving away from that piece of land. So it was largely primitive. There was no machines at all. The emergence and the spread of machines and factories and engines only started with the Industrial Revolution, And it reached its peak actually in the second half of the 18th century and the first half of the 19th century. Before the 18th century, there were no machines. It was a very calm life, very calm, no factories, very still, and also very boring. And it was natural at that time that schools were very few. I'm not saying no schools in absolute terms, but I'm saying that no schools available for everyone. Only a very limited class of people were admitted to schools. The majority of people were poor, and that is why people in France rebelled against the people in power in France. They needed learning, they needed more schools, they needed change. Same thing in England as well. What was there then? Only the farm and the church, and we will come back to this. Only the church and the farm. No change at all. There was no change. A very dull life. One critic said, describing that period of time, nothing came, nothing went, nothing happened. Stagnant. And let us take from this slide the last word, which is stagnant. It was the age of stagnation. It was the age of stagnation. Let us write down the word here. A very important word actually to describe the life of people in the 18th century. Stagnant. Please remember the word stagnation. No changes, as we said in the previous slide, no changes at all on any level. Look at the level of education, stagnation, no change, no schools, no universities. The same system of education existed in England before the 18th century, and schools and learning were only given and provided to a very limited class of people. In the field of health, also no change, stagnation. If someone fell ill at that time, then there was no doctor to treat them, no hospitals available in the vicinity. So what or how did people look after their health? Look at this word. There was no hospital. Instead of hospitals and doctors, people resorted to superstition, asking people who had no knowledge at all about medicine to treat them. So it was a very rich atmosphere for superstition and ignorance, of course. And this led to the deterioration of the health of people, of course. So in the field of education, there was stagnation. In the field of health, there was stagnation. In the field of religion as well, even religion, the source of knowledge that gives people's souls and spirits, a boost. You get everything that you need in life, motivation, inspiration, support, you understand, inspiration through religion. But that too was stagnant. It suffered from stagnation, and this is an important introduction to the religious revolution. Okay, so stagnation was the scene. It was the controlling value, the most prevalent and widespread and characteristic fact about the life of people before the 18th century was stagnation in education, in health, in religion, in industry, in medicine, in communication between people. All this was characterized by stagnation, and that is why Alexander Pope, the famous British poet, has these fine lines about the 18th century. What does he say? Look at this. It's a very nice poem from which I have taken these lines. He says, "Happy the man whose wish and care a few paternal acres bound, content to breathe his native air in his own ground. You know, again, happy the man, according to Alexander Pope, and of course not just Alexander Pope, according to everyone who lived before the 18th century, the happiest man ever was the one whose only wish in life is to have a piece of land inherited from his parents. It's not a piece of land that he got from the toil of his own hands, from diligence, from working hard. No, it's a piece of land that he inherited from his parents. That is the utmost wish that any man can dream of in order to be happy. To be happy, any man before the 18th century dreamed only of a piece of land inherited from his parents, and in this way he would be content to breathe his native air in his own ground. The happiest moment for him is to take care of this land, this ground, and to breathe his native air, to be native, to be local, to stay in this land only without getting in contact with other people anywhere, or without having any other hopes, any other ambitions. That was the state of affairs before the 18th century. Onto this comes the religious revolution. But before the revolution, let us see how people looked at religion and how religion affected people before the 18th century. I said there was stagnation in religion, in education, in health, in communication, everywhere. In terms of religion, the Dark Ages in Europe, see the term here that describes the ages before the 18th century. They are called the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages in Europe in general. So the death of reason. So if there is stagnation, if there is stillness, there is no thinking, you know, there is no reason, there is no arguing, there is no opinion. What was there instead? There was darkness. And with darkness, as I said some slides before, I said superstition, ignorance, you know, people without learning took control of everything, even medicine itself. There was no creativity, as people were told everything they needed to know by the church. How could you be creative when you have everything that you need to know through a religious institution like the church? You are not given any chance to think or to be creative or to argue or to have a different opinion. This is how things are. To understand politics, go to the church. To understand anything, go to that religious institution. That was the state of affairs in Europe and in England in particular before the 18th century. It controlled the lives of people. The church did not want people to think. There could be a question here. Why did the church do so? Why did it have all that much control upon the lives and minds of people before the 18th century? It's simply because it didn't want people to think. Okay, why then did it want people not to think? Simply because it needed them to remain devoted to it, to believe in it, to continue believing that the church is the best thing on earth. So we could form a question here. The church did not want people to think. Why? Simply because it needed them to remain devoted to it. And here, a question. Why did the church not want people to think? Why did the church refuse to allow people to think? Do you understand? Why? Why was it against thinking? Why was it against thinking? The answer is there in the previous slide. It needed them to remain devoted to it, because it needed them to remain devoted to it, to remain controlled by it, stuck to it, affected by it. In the 18th century, another question, what told people to do, what to do, and how to think? Which institution? Was it the church, the government, or the university? Of course, the church, right? It was the church. Okay. We are still talking about the religious scene in England before the 18th century. It made it easy for everyone to get rid of their sins. One of the most famous things about the church in England before the 18th century is how it looked at the idea of forgiveness, you know. Everyone sins, everyone makes mistakes. Okay? Now, if anyone makes any mistakes or sins, the shortest, quickest, best way possible is to pray that these sins be forgiven, right? But at that time, the church stood in the middle between man and the Creator and God. It said, if you make sins, come to us. We will give you indulgences. You give us money, and we give you an indulgence, okay, in return for that money, and in this case your sins are forgiven. That was very simple. So it was very easy for people to make mistakes and to sin, simply because if you sin, you know the solution. You'll go to the church, buy indulgences, and then your sins are forgiven. People therefore closed their minds. It was stagnation, you know. Khalas. They closed their minds and hearts and trusted so much in the authority of the church. They trusted in the authority of the church. They believed in everything that the church said, right? It interfered, not only this actually, but the church interfered even in the way people looked at life itself, not just committing sins and asking to be forgiven. No, the church also interfered in the way people looked at life itself. Your point of view, your understanding, your ideas, your ideology, all these were colored by the church. For example, this is a piece of scientific fact, you know. We all know that the earth revolves around the sun. This is the information that we all know now. But at that time, the church, because it gave people even their knowledge of science, it told them something different. It said the earth is the center of the universe. Please try to concentrate on this with me. The church is the center of the universe. Okay? How? Sorry, it told them the earth is the center of the universe. Okay? This is the earth, and this is the universe. And the earth here is the center of the whole universe. So the whole universe revolves around the earth. And in the center of the earth, there is the church. Do you understand? And in this way, the whole universe revolves around the church. So, therefore, logically, what is at the center of the whole universe? It is the church. Do you understand? Again, the church told them that the earth is the center of the universe and that the sun revolves around the earth, which is wrong, of course. Now, the earth revolves around the sun. The sun is stronger, much more powerful than the earth. For a long time, people believed this to be a scientifically proven fact. They didn't study, they just listened to what the church said. They never questioned its truthfulness. If the earth was the center of the universe, the church was at the center of the earth. And then the church is simply the center of the whole universe. If you read it twice, you will understand what I'm saying. The earth is the center of the universe. The church is the center of the earth. The church is the center of the whole world. So it was logical for people to believe everything that was stipulated by the church. Do you understand it now? This is the kind of knowledge, this is the kind of experience, this is the kind of information and values that the church provided people before the 18th century. Wrong information, mistaken information. All this because they wanted people not to think at all and to close their minds and hearts. Question now, according to the church in the 18th century, what was at the center of the universe? And notice the word in red. Okay? What was at the center of the universe? Was it the earth? Was it the sun? Was it the moon that was at the center of the universe? According to the church, no, it was the earth. Right? Another question. According to the church in the 18th century, okay, what was at the center of the earth? So at the center of the universe, there was the earth. At the center of the earth, there was the church. Do you understand now? So the values, the meanings, the ideas, the principles that came from the church were unquestionable, unarguable. That was an age of revolution, religious revolution, change, different from stagnation before. Before that, all these slides talk about England before the 18th century. Now, the modern ages gave scientists the chance to study this fact. Before that time, there was no study, no examination, no questioning, no arguing, no debating the fact that the church was at the center of the universe. But with Copernicus and other European, Galileo, other scientists that came with the Industrial Revolution and the Scientific Revolution and the Religious Revolution, they started to question that fact. They proved that the earth revolves around the sun. It is not the sun that revolves around the earth, it's the other way around. That means that the church is not the center of the universe. So all that was said before in the previous ages is wrong, you know. So not everything the church said was true. And that was the beginning of the religious revolution. People were encouraged to rely more on themselves for forgiveness, on the heart. As I said before, if you make mistakes, if you commit a sin, all you had to do was to go to the church and buy indulgences in order to be forgiven. With the religious, scientific, industrial revolution, people understood something else. They understood that they could rely on themselves for forgiveness. If I want to be forgiven, I don't have to go to the church. I will rely on myself. The path, the way, the passage to real repentance, forgiveness, was not the church, but a direct relationship with God, with the Creator. That in itself is a real revolution, you know. It's a total change, complete change. Okay, every individual person felt important. This means that you count. As an individual, you are different, you are better, you are important. Yes, you can, you know. As the President of the USA said at the end of 2008 when he was nominated as President of the USA. Yes, we can. You know, every individual person felt important. There's a question here. Every individual in the 18th century, notice, in the 18th, not before. Before the 18th century, everything was stagnant, still, calm, not moving, not changing. There was stagnation, stillness, impotence. Okay, every individual in the 18th century felt what? Important, unimportant, or ugly? I know you know the answer. Look at the last slide, last piece of information. Every individual person felt important. We will study more about this very soon in this lecture, inshallah. Please pay attention to this. The French Revolution wanted equality, fraternity, brotherhood, liberty, freedom. Okay? Also the American Revolution wanted happiness for everyone, called for happiness for everyone. The religious revolution also led people to think and to depend on themselves. So all the words included in fair. We have so far taken or studied the French Revolution, the American Revolution, and the religious revolution. We have postponed the study of the Industrial Revolution till later. So the appearance of individualism, and this will be explained later. In all fields of life, individual persons felt important and confident. Every individual felt self-respect, self-importance. They needed to achieve themselves by reading more, traveling, exploring, having lots of adventure. They were imprisoned before. In the Middle Ages, it was the age of superstition. It was the age of stagnation. It was the age of closure. People were closed. Happy the man whose wish and care a few paternal acres bound, content to breathe his native air in his local ground. As Pope said, happy the man whose wish and care a few paternal acres bound, content to breathe his native air in his own ground. That was the state of affairs before. There was stagnation, as I said. There was stagnation, stillness. But with the 18th century, with the religious revolution, the American Revolution and the French Revolution, things changed. Everyone wanted to read more, to travel more, to explore more, to have lots of adventure, to see the whole world, to be a different person, relying on themselves, not relying on the church. So, a question: all revolutions in the 18th century led to the increased importance of parties, of wars, of individuals, of course, of individuals. So everyone felt very important, and that was the result of the factors that we have studied about the 18th century. In the past, there was stillness. In the 18th century, there was change, freedom, brotherhood, equality, power, change. You understand? So every individual felt important. Let us sum it up again. Before and after the Industrial Revolution, the same thing. Before the French Revolution, there was no freedom. As I said, if you remember from the first lecture, injustice, inequality, and oppression. The revolution came and called for equality, democracy, freedom, brotherhood, justice. Do you understand? The same thing. Before the religious revolution, there were many mistakes, many disadvantages, many bad things that the revolution came and tried to correct. Like the control of the church, the hegemony of the church over people, the minds of people and the hearts of people. The religious reformation came and allowed people to have confidence in themselves. People began to be respected, self-confident, and they had a direct communication with their God if they wanted to be forgiven from their sins. The same thing, the same method, the same methodology will be followed here when we talk about the Industrial Revolution. In the field of industry, as we all know, means machines, engines, factories, large-scale production, roads, communication, renaissance. You know, that is industry, or the Industrial Revolution. How did England look like before the Industrial Revolution? This is the revolution. Factories, you know, smoke. We will deal with that in the next lecture, inshallah. First of all, before we talk about England before the Industrial Revolution, you have to know that the Industrial Revolution had very strong effects. See the word I'm providing here: influential transformation of human culture since the advent of agriculture 8 or 10,000 years ago. Oh my God, the most important effect upon humanity since the invention of agriculture 10 or 8 years ago was the Industrial Revolution. In the 18th century, the most important change that took place in history after agriculture is the Industrial Revolution. It completely changed the lives of people. The consequences, the results of this revolution will change completely human labor. It will change consumption, family structure, social structure, and even the very soul and thoughts of the individual. All those matters will be subject to change. It changed the lives of people in the 18th century. England was rural. People lived and worked at farms in what is called the age of feudalism. The entire life of people were limited to farming the fields. No transportation, no communication, no hospitals, no machines, no universities or large-scale production. That is before the Industrial Revolution in England, and we will study the effects of the Industrial Revolution on people positively and negatively at the beginning of the next lecture. Thank you very much. See you next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.